Here's the second part of the test review podcast for the Unit 3 exam. Actually, Roman dates are easier than Greek dates because the empire begins around the year 0 CE. Remember Luke chapter 2, in those days Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world? At any rate, the Etruscans ruled Italy before 500 BCE, about the same time as the Archaic period in Greece. The Roman Republic lasted about 500 years, although it got pretty shaky at the end, and Augustus started up the empire when we start counting up instead of backwards in the calendar. The 2nd century CE is a good century for the empire. I changed those from 80 to CE, and the 4th century CE sees the beginning of the Eastern Christian Empire. Again, if you focus on 0 and remember that Pompey gets buried early in the empire, you'll do okay. Here again, this slide should be pretty self-explanatory. I'm giving you the answer here, but it's an important point about Roman art that I may not have made adequately in my lectures. The Greeks tended to use mythological scenes as allegories for real events, such as the civilized Greeks' victories over the barbarians, being shown as victories over centaurs or giants, whatever. The Romans did this sometimes. Think of the mythological references on the Augustus of Prima Porta and on the Arapachus. But a lot of Roman art aimed at capturing and recording actual historical realities. Here are some more pretty straightforward questions. Which of our required works is most similar stylistically to this one? Careful, think of a work that's pretty much from the same era and has a similar style. How is it different from this and similar works? That should be easy. Where would this statue have originally been found? And this offers you a big hint. What was a common feature of the exterior of the Etruscan temples? Basically, what's kind of weird about this temple? This image shows up on more than one past test. So what was its function? Which culture made it? What was the sculpture made from? Where would it or sculptures like it have been placed? And check out, you need one of your vocabulary words here. Who are the people pictured and what activity does the sculpture portray? What makes this work in this culture unusual in the Greek and Roman world? And here's a tougher question. Which other culture pretty clearly influenced this work? Well, look at the faces, especially the man's. There are several questions about the work on the upper left. You see a detail on the lower right and a plan for the entire complex on the upper right. So what is it? What was it commemorating specifically? Where was it placed? What was its function? By the way, I don't think I mentioned this in my podcast. This was actually Trajan's tomb. I can't remember if this information showed up in the homework either, so now you know it was his tomb. What kind of style were the Nabatean architects imitating? For that matter, what is the artistic style of this building as identified in your homework? Think about the fact that the Nabateans lived at a cultural crossroads and that they liked to borrow from many different sources. The College Board loves Pompeii, more specifically the architecture of Roman houses and the styles of Roman wall painting. The image on the right is from the House of the Veti. What room are we seeing? What other architectural features do you observe? What were the functions of this room? And hint, the photo gives you the correct answer, but the photo is not on the exam. What is the date of these works? Basically, that's asking when did Vesuvius erupt? What is the style of the paintings on the left from the Ixion room? What are the characteristics of this style and the subjects of these paintings? Some other things you should know. About when would these have been painted? In other words, about when did Pompeii get preserved in volcanic ash? I warned you that the AP version of floor plans would not have labels. So this is a plan of, how would this interior have been decorated? I'll give you a hint. There were mosaics, but they were found on the floor, not the walls. Read your question carefully. What can we learn about this kind of structure from studying this floor plan? I'm not going to give you the answer. If you can read a floor plan, it should be pretty obvious. What is the large area on the bottom left called? So these paintings come from the Ixion room of the House of the Veti. What kind of narratives do these paintings tell? How does the painting on the left show depth and volume? Look at how the figures are placed and how the light hits them. And what painting technique is shown here that will be revived in the Renaissance? Again, what style of Pompeian wall painting does this represent? So who are these two people? What are they holding and why? Oh, and again, when again was Pompeii rediscovered and excavated? Some other things you should know. About when would these have been painted? Again, once more you need to know when Pompeii got preserved in volcanic ash. Okay, you should all recognize these two guys and know what period both sculptures were made. For the work on the left, what work was the artist deliberately copying, with some important differences? What function did both sculptures serve? What message were they sending? What Greek sculptural period is most similar to the sculpture on the right? By the way, the sculpture on the left, hint, 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 is from this Greek period. So here's another image and work that used to show up on multiple AP tests and is still on McConnell-Jacobs required work. What event does this frieze depict? Where was it placed? Why was the sculpture displayed to the people of the city? What art historical period is represented here? More generally, why did the Romans erect and decorate all these columns, arches, and basilicas? Why did the decorations depict actual historical events rather than mythological scenes? Note again that when the Greeks wanted to portray their great victories, they made friezes and showed giants battling gods or Achilles taking on the Trojans. The Romans portrayed real emperors fighting real battles against real enemies. For that matter, think of Trajan's column. They also portrayed Romans building bridges, erecting fortifications, or meting out justice as themselves, not as gods. So the Romans were much more literal than the Greeks. They also succeeded in ruling for a whole lot longer. I included this in the Roman questions because this work was actually found in a house in Pompeii, although it was a Roman copy of a Greek work. What medium is this? In other words, how was this work made? What event does it portray? Okay, this is one you must know. What building is it? Where is it located? That'll be easy for now, but later you will have to recall a dizzying array of buildings. And moreover, this design was innovative for its time, but it was much copied later, especially in Islamic and Byzantine art. So what was the building's original use and what was it converted into? You may need to look up the answer to the second question. We haven't gotten there yet, but I did include a photo which should give you a hint, especially for students at Juan Diego. Who commissioned this work? Who was its original patron? By the way, you don't need a name, which is just as well since a whole succession of people were involved in ordering this build and rebuild, but they were all blank. And it was built under whose reign? The dome was primarily constructed with what material? Notice that this question appears more than once. Stick it in the hard drive. What are those indentations in the dome called? What purpose did they serve? What is the term for the central opening in the dome, and what covers or doesn't cover it? What was most impressive about this building? What effect were the architects above all trying to achieve? By the way, a hint for this question, the pronaos is the porch and it's rectangular. Circumnambulate means to walk around in a circle, and you can't circumnambulate a square porch. I think you'll find the correct answer obvious.